It's late May, and that means a whole bunch of fish of all species are up shallow and feeding. What does that mean? It's time to put your lures on a diet, and we're going to talk about that on this episode of Fishful Thinker, the podcast. I'm Chad LaChance, and you're listening to Fishful Thinker, the podcast. All things fishful, all the time. Hey guys, Chad LaChance here. Thanks so much as always for tuning into this episode of Fishful Thinker, the podcast, brought to us, of course, by the folks at Sportsman's Warehouse. Please visit them at sportsmans.com for all your outdoor needs, including hunting, fishing, cooking, camping, reloading, and clothing. And also don't forget the fine folks at Peterson Toyota, Fort Collins, Colorado, ready to service all your Toyota, car, truck, and Volvo needs as well. So guys, here we are staring down the barrel of Memorial Day weekend, and hopefully everybody's got plans. Got your ducks in a row, your coolers packed, whatever it is you're doing. Please don't forget the spirit of the holiday as well, but enjoy the time in the field while you're doing so with your friends and family, and hopefully get some maybe camping done or boating or whatever it is that you do to enjoy the holiday weekend outside. But this is a great time of year to fish. We talk about it a lot, and a big part of the reason that this is a great time of year to fish is that there's a lot of fish that are shallow. And when I say there's a lot of fish, that means almost any species of fish, there's a good chance that there's a good number of them that are up shallow at this time of year. And that really isn't super relevant to where you are, even in the country. Even in the South, there's still going to be a bunch of post-spawn fish that are shallow. Bluegills and brim, all that will start coming in to spawn right around now, I would imagine, down south as well. We're pre-spawn here in Colorado on the bigger reservoirs, and I'm sure there's fish spawning as far as the bass go in the smaller lakes around town. But that's not all about the warm water species, keep in mind, because the high country lakes are not so far from ice out at this point. They've only been open for a relatively short period of time and haven't had a chance to really get hot yet. So you still got a bunch of shallow trout, and they'll be feeding potentially on and around, I should say, all the vegetation that's growing in those lakes. But then you've also got things like walleyes that are in shallow, taking advantage of all other things that are coming in behind them just to feed. So for instance, in my home lake, the rainbow smelt come in, and those smelt then will draw walleyes shallow. So there's a whole bunch of reasons, but as with most comments I make about fishing, I don't necessarily care why, other than to predict it. What I care is that they are there and how to address them, and that's the most important reason. Same kind of thing with why they bite. I don't care why they bite, I care that they bite. And so that's the same way I look at the shallow water fish. So the fact that there's a bunch of them shallow, and I kind of made a joke in the intro about putting your lures on a diet. Well, what I really want to talk about, what the core of this podcast is going to be is meant to be, is the putting your lures on a diet is kind of a joke to taking the lead out, so to speak. We're going to talk a bunch, or I'm going to talk a bunch about weightless lures or barely weighted lures. Because of so many fish that are up shallow of all the different species, it's an opportunity to catch them with lures that sink very slowly. And a very slow fall rate can be fantastic at times, particularly with fish that are feeding or fish that are getting a lot of pressure. And I've said it before a lot of times. When fish are getting a lot of pressure, I like to fish the extremes, either the fastest lure or the slowest lure, either the biggest lure or the smallest lure, whatever the case might be. I like to fish the extremes. So when they're getting a lot of pressure, a very slow sinking lure can be an excellent call for tricking them as well. So the lightweight lures is really a mindset all the way around. And so before we get too deep into it, let me talk about what do I mean when I say weightless. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be soft plastic baits, because really they're the only thing that you could take the weight off of. If you're talking about a jerk bait or a crank bait or anything like that, they all have their built-in depth ranges and all that stuff based on the diving bill or the weight of the lure itself. But with a soft plastic, it's really just the plastic itself. and maybe the weight of the hook and line that you have to deal with. And in a couple scenarios over the next short period of time, and guys, I'm going to keep this one relatively short as well. Our podcasts have always historically been right around 30 minutes. I'm going to aim more for around 20. Just kind of a long story, but I'll spare you the details, but it has to do with some personal stuff with me. But at any rate, keeping this thing relatively short, we might include a small split shot, but that's the extent of the weight we're going to add to anything over the course of these presentations today. And multi-species as well. That's the other thing I want to point out. We're talking about a whole bunch of different fish. And basically, I'll break it down by the genre and where I might throw that genre. So the first and most obvious one, particularly in the bass crowd, is going to be the soft stickworm. Now, if you're a hardcore bassin guy, you're immediately going to go to Gary Yamamoto and his Senko, the old classic Senko that came about years and years ago. He apparently designed it because they were literally twiddling their thumbs around a desk one day and twirling a pen. And somebody said, hey, geez, the shape of that pen. And they went with it from there, and it went on to be a relatively iconic bait, the Senko. Well, fast forward a little bit, and having conversations with John Prochnow at Berkeley's research scientist at Berkeley, he explained to me that the more appendages they put on a bait, the less bites it gets. Well, that speaks volumes about the Senko or the soft stickworm in general. And again, they were originally Senkos, but now everybody's got their own version of it. The Yum Dinger, Berkeley, of course, has the general in both Maxent, power bait Maxent, and regular power bait, I should say. There's just a whole bunch of different brands. Yum, I think I already said that, the Yum Dinger. There's a bunch of different brands that have them. But at the end of the day, it's a piece of soft plastic that's heavy enough in and of itself that it will sink. And it's also heavy enough to cast. Generally pigeonholed as a bass bait, and I kind of agree with that, although I have caught a couple of snook on them. This is certainly not a podcast about snook fishing, and even if it was, I wouldn't include that, but it is definitely a viable bait. And the reason that that's important is because it's bite getting deal. And the whole deal with the soft stickworm, and as with a lot of these, it may be very important where you put the hook and what hook you put in it in terms of if you're going to fish it weightless. And when I say fish it weightless, I mean with no intentionally added weight, like lead, nail weights, anything like that. And a lot of guys will stick a nail weight in the back of one, or put a split shot up the line or something like that. And you can do that, but you'll take away some of the subtleness that I'm talking about here. So for me, the soft stickworm could be either wacky rigged, meaning a hook stuck crossways through the middle of it. And I've got a really good trick for that, to use some shrink tubing around the middle, some electrical shrink tube, put it around the middle of the bait, hit it with a lighter real quick in your boat. It'll shrink down tight against the soft stickworm, and then you can stick your hook through the middle of that, and you'll never go through stickworms. So that's a good trick. Check it out on our YouTube channel at Fishful Thinker. Beyond that, the wacky rig is excellent. It's the slowest fall rate because the bait is hooked in the middle and then is allowed to sink horizontally. Now, you could cheat the hook to one end or the other. It will sink slightly different if you do that. But generally speaking, a wacky rig's an excellent call. The weakness of the wacky rig is for sure snagging. Okay, and keep that in mind. So, and yes, they make them with weed guards on little octopus hooks and things like that, specialized hooks, but they're still not as snagless as when rigged other ways, and that's just all there is to that. But the wacky rig is a fantastic way to catch particularly bass, largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, all the black bass family will do well with that. But I've also caught walleyes and others, and it's worth, if you know you've got fish pinned down on a graph or something like that, keeping it in mind, in the back of your mind, as a viable option for them as well. But it needs to sink as slow as possible, and it kind of has its own little shimmy on the way down, and therein lies the appeal. But the more weight you add to it, the less subtle the bait gets, and therefore some of the bite getting goes out the window. So a wacky rig, Senko, or soft stickworm is one of my favorites, and I throw the General all the time. That's the bait I throw, and it's pretty much always in Power Bait Max scent. And really, any of the baits I'm going to talk about over here over the next 10 minutes or so are going to be best served with a bunch of salt or flavor or smell. And that's part of the reason I throw so much Max scent or Power Bait or Gulp, because of that scent and that flavor. And it's because the fish are going to get all kinds of time to look at the bait sinking and make a decision, and they're going to be able to nip it if they want, meaning they can just kind of slurp one end of it, decide if they like it, and then suck it the rest of the way in and get caught. So it's on in how well you can get them to commit to biting. And the one knock, there's two knocks against unweighted baits. One is that getting committed bites, because fish will just nip at something. They'll just grab it by the tail. So first thing is you need to be very patient with hook sets and make sure that they've got the bait, because the benefit is without all the sinkers and all the hardware and everything, they'll hold the bait very well, but you still need to be diligent with your hook set. And then the other disadvantage is wind. And if the wind's blowing like it is again today here in Colorado, unweighted baits are not necessarily your best choice. So we'll just get that out there right now. So back to the soft stickworm. Docks, overhanging covers, cover of any kind, boats, anything that hangs out over the water, bushes, limbs, trees, whatever that hangs out over the water, gives them overhanging cover, great spot. Bluff walls, heavy duty straight down vertical drop offs. Here in Colorado, there's a lake called Pueblo, southern Colorado, got a big bluff. Right as you're leaving the main marina, big old bluff. The water's like 30 feet deep. Boats right up against the bluff, it's 30 feet deep right under the boat. I've done really well dropping wacky rigs down that bluff, and it takes a long time for that bait to get all the way down there, but it's okay because it's in the hunt all the way down. So as long as the wind's not blowing, you have time to slack it out, then great, fantastic. And I've done really well doing that. And everybody and their uncle fishes that bluff on their way out, but nobody has the patience to drop unweighted baits down it, and that makes a big difference, because they see all kinds of stuff sink down that wall, but they don't necessarily see the unweighted stuff. So any vertical thing like that is when I want to throw the wacky rig. I need to have a small spot. I can't cover a lot of water with a wacky rig. It's too slow, and if you're fishing it fast enough to cover water, you're not fishing it well. So keep that in mind. Unless the water is very, very shallow, say 2 feet or less, the bait's taking a while to get down. And on the way down is when it has its drawing power. So then we'll just do a lift on it, reel up some of the slack, and then guard it as it sinks back down. In other words, follow the bait down with the rod tip at the same speed. So if the bait's dropping a foot a second, my rod tip's dropping a foot a second as well, to maintain the equal amount of slack line. That's the only way to know if I'm bit or not. I'll either feel it, or I'll see it swim off, or I'll just very gently pick up on it just a little bit, not jar it, not yank on it, just gently pick it up and feel for even pressure and weight on there. And if there's weight, I'll go right to a hook set. But that's probably the one that most of you already know about, so I'll leave it alone. The other possibility is to take that same soft stickworm and rig it Texas style. And again, there's videos on Texas style rigging on our YouTube channel. Check those out. If you really need it to be weightless and throw it around shallow cover, that's the way to do it. And I can't tell you how many fish I've caught that way, but it's been a lot. Fantastic way to go about it. But again, the soft stickworm is one you guys probably know about. You probably do it a lot, and particularly hardcore bass guys are well tuned into that one. If you're relatively new to bass fishing, pick that one up and learn it. Get yourself a 4-inch or a 5-inch, the general, in a heavy scented, Power Bait Max scent, in a natural color, which they pretty much all are in that line, and get after them. Just don't overwork the bait. It's a do-nothing bait. The more you do, the less fish you're going to catch. In fact, famous bass pro Gerald Swindle even made a joke. He's like, it was a do-nothing bite, and I wasn't doing nothing right. Well, exactly. He blanked because he was fishing too fast when everybody around him was literally doing nothing, letting their bait sink and catching fish. So keep that in mind. Now, from there, what other unweighted options might I throw? Well, here's another one that I really like, and you don't see that much. It's basically a wacky rig with a 4 to maybe even 6-inch nightcrawler looking soft plastic. And I'm going to also, like I said, wacky rig it. I'm going to put a much smaller hook in it than I would with something like a full-blown Senko. And then I'm going to throw it in the river on light powered tackle. And that hook's going to be a semicircle hook or even a full circle hook. And what you'll find out is that thing will drift beautifully. Like a night crawler, you can give it a little bit of action if you want. It'll stay high in the water column, means you'll hardly ever snag it. And as long as the water is reasonably clear, the fish will come darting up and grab that quite well. You'll be surprised at how many trout will come up and grab that thing, and it works really good. The other thing is some of the little 3-inch soft stick worms also work well for that, although I've done better with 4 and 5-inch just straight tail, what would technically be known as a bass worm of some sort, works really good, and it's just heavy enough that you can throw it on light tackle. If the current's really ripping, maybe a tiny split shot or even a swivel slightly up the line ahead of it is an excellent call. So that's another unweighted option. It's a trout option, and it works very well. That same option will work if you're working weed lines as they develop in some of the North and South Park lakes in Colorado for trout. And the trout will cruise those weed lines, and an unweighted worm that's wacky rig, just thrown up there and allowed to sink down those weed hedges, will get picked up easily by trout. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. I mentioned a minute ago using a small swivel for my weight, just a little bit of weight. Same kind of thing. Old school bass guys will know the old Zoom trick worm. Well, that concept with using just the swivel for the weight has never been lost on me. And I put all kinds of stuff behind that you might not think about. And one of them is a 3-inch or 4-inch gulp minnow, and it may be hooked through the nose or it may be hooked through the side depending on what I want. If I want to work it forward with a twitch forward motion and then kill it and let it drift down, but it's nose hooked like you would if you were going to drop shot with it, but it just sinks very slow. It's an excellent option to fish behind people that are fishing. Let's say you're fishing docks. One of my home lakes here, Boyd Lake, is very gets absolutely plundered. This lake gets tons of pressure. There's been times when an unweighted gulp minnow with a nose hook in it will get me bites when nothing else will. When there's 50 bass boats running around in a 1,000-acre lake, it's a good way to get bites, and it speaks to the pressured fish thing. It looks real, it smells real, it tastes real, it doesn't sink too fast, doesn't sink too slow, doesn't have any flash or vibration, doesn't have any extra weight. If they pick it up, it feels natural, and you can hook all of them. For the record, I've caught some big old yellow perch doing that. I've caught some big bluegills and crappies doing that. And so it's a very good option to take that 3 or 4-inch gulp minnow. You just have to throw it on really light line, because if you don't throw it on light line and light rod, you can't present it well. So that's the thing you have to keep in mind. Now, if you want to step it up from there, also, just for the record, when there is a little bit of a breeze, but it's manageable, that same rig can be excellent around suspended fish, where you'll let the wind do the work. So I'll throw it upwind, and as the bait sinks, the wind will drift it towards you. And in a lake situation, that's a fantastic way to get bites from fish that are getting a lot of pressure as well. And if you need to step it up from there, you could go to a 5 or 6 or even a 7-inch gulp jerk shad. And one of the biggest bass I ever caught in Colorado bit a 7-inch gulp jerk shad unweighted. That's technically a saltwater bait, but it's basically a 7-inch long gulp minnow. And I was dealing with bass that were eating 2-year-old shad, which are anywhere from 6 to 9 inches long. And so I was throwing that thing unweighted. It's so heavy, you got to throw it on a big old casting rod, even without weight on it. And it did very, very well. And so keep that in mind. Up to the big one for saltwater can be really good, but the smaller ones, the 5 and 6-inch ones, were traditionally favored amongst bass guys. But now with a split shot or a tiny swivel ahead of it, and then rigged either with a nose hook or Texas rigged, it's a great bait for forward-facing sonar guys that are finding fish that are higher in the column, that refuse everything. You can get them to bite that because it sinks really slow, and again, it smells and tastes right and all of that. Could be, you guys may be familiar with the old fluke. Could be the power jerk shad, the gulp jerk shad. Everybody makes their version of that as well. For me, it's a gulp jerk shad for the same reason. It's got that gulp flavor. Fantastic unweighted bait. Can work really, really well for a variety of species. And that to me is the most multi-species of all of these. And I may rig it with the hook sideways in the bait, meaning it's kind of wacky rigged, for lack of a better way to put it, but the hook is, say, 2/3 of the way forward on the bait. So it goes into a sort of slow nosedive, but it's slow. It doesn't sink fast, but it goes a little bit slow, and because it's got some weight of the bait ahead of the hook, it will plane off to one side and it won't sink straight down. And it's a really excellent way to get bites on like I said, a 5, 6, 7-inch jerk shad. Really good. Could be walleyes, could be bass, could be pike. It's an excellent pike bait to do that. And the beauty of it is you're only dealing with a single hook. So if you're dealing with say, pike, you don't want to deal with a bunch of treble hooks, it's a great choice right there. And yes, you're going to get a lot of bites. The one thing I'll tell you with it is be brutal with your hook sets. If you're going to rig that thing unweighted, a pike's going to get a hold of it. He's going to clamp down on it. You're going to need to give him all 7 feet when he bites it, because they're going to hold on to it. And the one knock I've had with unweighted baits and pike like that is they'll get a good hold of it, and you've really got to jerk it through their teeth, and that's something to keep in mind. Not a big deal with bass. Walleyes don't bite it that hard, but pike will for sure bite it hard. Conversely, you got to get them to bite before you can hook them, and it's a great way to get bites. So a couple things real quick about unweighted baits. I don't do it with a lot of different baits. It's typically the minnow style bait, from a gulp minnow up to the gulp jerk shad. So in other words, a 3-inch gulp minnow to a 7-inch gulp jerk shad. I work all of those. I consider them all basically the same. I just rig them up or down hook wise and tackle wise just on their size. So that's an important thing there. And then I will do the soft stick worms. And then from there, unweighted baits, I kind of get away from most of them from there, with the other possibility being a hardcore single bass, just a bass bait. And that's a frog of some sort that you can throw unweighted. And I'm not talking about a hollow bodied frog. I'm talking about a soft rubber frog that you thread on your own hook on a Texas rig. I'll throw those occasionally, but usually I'm going to go ahead and opt for the double hooked soft body frog in that scenario. So a couple key things. Size your tackle appropriately. The most frustrating thing is an unweighted bait that's thrown on a rod that's too heavy to throw it. I see that a lot. So if you normally throw a, whatever medium heavy rod for something, when you take the weight off, you probably need a medium. Or if you normally throw a medium, maybe you need a medium light, or whatever the case might be, but tone the rod down a little bit. Second of all, my unweighted baits are pretty much always on straight braided line, because the bites are subtle, but usually the fish will hold on to them. It gives you a really good chance for a good clean hook set. And things like that. I will commonly have, depending on the water clarity, I'll have a fluorocarbon leader on the front, or maybe even a mono leader if I want to keep the bait really high in the column for longer, slow the fall rate a whole bunch. I can put it on a heavy monofilament leader, which is thick and floats and will hold it up in the water column quite a bit. And if I need it to sink a little bit faster, I can take that mono off and put a fluoro leader, which will double the sink rate. And then if I want to sink even faster still, I can take the hook off and put a heavy shanked hook on it, and then it will sink even faster without changing the look of anything and without really making a fundamental difference. It won't sink as fast doing that as if you put a sinker on it, and you certainly won't have point loaded it. So meaning that it won't have one spot that has a heavy, dense sinker on it that changes everything. It's got the weight spread out. The heavier fluorocarbon leader and or heavy shanked hook spread that weight out, and it works pretty good. So those are important. The braided line could be anything from really light braid on like the trout stuff all the way up to really heavy braid on pike stuff. Could be 50, with that 7-inch gulp jerk shad, could be 80-pound braid. Because it's very manageable. And at that point, if you're talking about 50-pound anyway, you might as well throw 80, because it throws just fine, and you ain't gonna break nothing with 80-pound. It's just all there is to it. So you have no chance of breaking stuff off. More importantly, it's very easy to steer. It stays higher in the column. It works great around heavy cover. So I throw heavy braid for that. It has nothing to do with the fact that I need 80-pound test. It's very manageable line is the thing. So then the other thing to keep in mind amongst all of this stuff is keep your eye on your line. This is a line watching gig. If you only hook The fish that you feel bite, you're going to get a small percentage of them. You really need to watch for line to swim away and then not get in a hurry. If you pick up gently on the rod tip and you feel that there's pressure on there, and when I say pick up gently, hang the rod loose in your hand and just gently pick up on it. You'll feel if there's a fish on there or not. You don't want to bounce slack at them. You don't want them to feel the jar. Just gently pick up and put a little tension on it. You'll feel them. And if they're there, then give them a little slack, boom, pop them. You'll get them every time. If you get in a hurry and try to pull into them, you're not going to get a lot of them. And if you're not watching your line, you're not even going to know a bunch of them were there. So those are the important parts of it. I love fishing weightless baits this time of year because it's the classic. I get a chance to look at the camera guy. Hey man, I got a bite right here. Are you ready? Yeah, okay, we're ready. Okay, good. Hey, got him. Because again, the fish most of the time are not going to spit this out, and it doesn't matter what kind of fish we're throwing. What kind of fish we're throwing to. So, at any rate, if you guys want to join the conversation, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or X, please do so at Fishful Thinker. Obviously, YouTube channel as well at Fishful Thinker. To be honest, we're a little behind on the YouTube channel right now, and I'll spare you the details. Thanks for all the support I've got from you guys, though. If you know, you know. As far as that goes, and I'll keep you posted on that. And if you don't know, I don't want to take time in this podcast to go through it. We'll deal with that later. And then lastly, Altitude Sports Entertainment and World Fishing Network. We're airing on both of those at least 5 days a week and 7 days a week on WFN right now. So hope you guys will check that out. Appreciate you listening. This has been Fishful Thinker, the podcast.